Also on the docket at the State House is a pair of bills that would officially do away with the Christopher Columbus holiday here in Massachusetts. In its place, the lawmakers behind the bills want to establish Indigenous Peoples Day. They hope the change will, quote, acknowledge the history of genocide and discrimination against Indigenous peoples and recognize and celebrate the thriving cultures and continued resistance and resilience of them. Now, the Senate bill was sponsored by State Senator Jo Comerford. She joins me now, along with, and I love this name, Matui Monroe, co-leader of the United American Indians of New England. She's been leading the statewide campaign for Indigenous people since 2015. So, welcome to Greater Boston. Wanted to thank you for coming on board and give me an update. Where does this stand? How are we? And give me a perspective of our other folks around the country doing this as well.
There have been.
We had a hearing.
Go ahead, Senator Comerford.
Go ahead.
Bills have been passed in cities and towns all over the country. And in fact, there's more than a dozen states that have already replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. In Massachusetts, we've worked in more than 30 cities and towns at this point that have enacted an Indigenous Peoples Day in lieu of Columbus Day. So this has been happening for a long time. We've been asking for Indigenous Peoples Day since the 1970s, but in recent years, the wave on this has really picked up. And so it's great to see that Maine has already done this, Vermont has already done this, California and other states. But unfortunately, it still needs to be done in Massachusetts as a statewide bill.
Yeah. State Representative, why? So who opposes this, right? I mean, you presented it. There's been opposition, especially from the Italian American community. But who else have you heard? Other state reps? What's the resistance?
So, very good question. Let me just say that I partner with Representative Christine Barber on this bill. So we're a team along with many state representatives and state senators who support this in the legislature. And, you know, we also have to recognize that there are many Italian Americans who have organized before this session and during this session to support this bill. So like with any community, you know, Italian Americans in the Commonwealth are not a monolith. There are lots of people coming forward in support of an Indigenous Peoples Day. Yeah. And it's actually 20 states nationwide have done this. And Massachusetts, in my opinion, needs to be next in line. So there are certainly people in the Italian American community who don't want to let go, understandably, of an opportunity to honor Italian American heritage. It's important to remember that this current month, October, is, you know, a month to honor Italian Americans in the Commonwealth. And so we believe that we can do both and do both well by recognizing the second Monday in October as Indigenous Peoples Day and recognizing Italian American contributions throughout the month of October.
Well, we do have some that say you're taking one day away to replace with another one. And we have Representative Jeff Turco of Winthrop with that argument. Let's take a listen.
Nobody objects to creating an Indigenous People Day, but to pit one group of people against another people, I think, is an unfortunate approach. This Commonwealth can rightly recognize Indigenous people without throwing the Italian people collectively under the bus. You know, if we wanted to change, Columbus Day and call it Italian American Heritage Day, Italian American Heritage Month, that's one thing. But a bill that basically disregards the contributions of Italian American people is offensive to so many across this Commonwealth.
Can you take another day? Why replace that one? Isn't like around Thanksgiving time an appropriate time to do this?
Well, let me just back up and say this bill doesn't disrespect Italian Americans. It says that Christopher Columbus, as a figurehead, is not worthy of memorialization or celebration, because we understand now as people that Christopher Columbus, although painted with a very rosy brush, you know, early on in the nation's history, is, you know, did through violence and subjugation, acts that, again, I think we as a Commonwealth don't value generally. So I don't think it's a dichotomy. I think it's really important that we back up from an either or proposition. Certainly the committee could do whatever it wants with this bill. I'm hoping it reports it out. But the committee in its wisdom, or House and Senate leadership in their wisdom, could institute another state holiday, or we could figure out a way to recognize the contributions, the many contributions of Italian Americans throughout the month of October, which is now dedicated to them.
Ms. Monroe,
I do want to be clear that our fight is not with Italian Americans, and it's unfortunate that it's sometimes being couched in those terms by organizations and individuals who are claiming to speak for all Italian Americans, which they don't. You know, many Italians agree with us that Columbus is the wrong guy to back as a symbol of Italian cultural pride. And that's for a host of reasons, which I'd like to discuss further. And we also have wonderful Italian-American allies who've listened and understood the need to have Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day. You know, Joseph Curtatone, who used to be mayor of Somerville, when he decided to adopt Indigenous Peoples Day there, he said, adopting Indigenous Peoples Day recognizes that the specifics of this holiday, meaning the Columbus Day holiday, run so deep into human suffering that we need to shift our pride elsewhere as Italians.
Very interesting. So where are we going to be able to celebrate this year in Massachusetts? Is it still Columbus Day? Is it Indigenous Day? When will, if it makes a change, is it more for next year? Give me, if you can, a timeline.
So the bill just had a hearing. It was a packed hearing room full of supporters, and the committee hasn't yet acted on the bill, which means there's no chance of it being instituted for this coming Monday. My hope would be next year on this 3-day weekend. We have reframed it, as Matoi was saying so beautifully from the former mayor of Somerville, that we're able to really embrace that kind of change in how we're shifting our focus.
Having said that, there are cities and towns all across the Commonwealth who will be celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day instead of Columbus Day on Monday. And there are celebrations happening all over, from Aquina and Mashpee out on the Cape, going all the way to the western part of the state.
Before we go, can you tell me a little bit about your organization, just for those folks who don't know? Ms. Monroe,
I'm sorry?
a little bit more about your organization and what it does.
Sure. So our organization is United American Indians of New England. We are a coalition partner with the Mass Indigenous Legislative Agenda, which has brought 5 bills before the legislature, one of which is the Indigenous Peoples Day bill. We've also been working statewide with many communities who want to make the change to Indigenous Peoples Day to help them to make that happen. I'd love to be able to explain to your listeners why we are working on Indigenous Peoples Day, because I don't think we've gotten to that yet.
Excellent. Well, either way, I want to thank you for spending the time today. It was very timely with the holiday right around the corner. So I want to wish you a happy long weekend, and hopefully you'll be back, as this will not go away. This will probably be in the news again by next year. So thank you very much for stopping by Greater Boston.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.